Okay, everybody. I feel like I should have come out with a new outfit or something. I know. Wouldn't that have been fun? Yeah, it would have felt like the Oscars or something. That is actually a dream of mine. Wouldn't that be fun to host the Oscars? The entire MAMP team right now is just like, no. No, that is why you, Jen, are standing at the front, because you are the only moth in our entire team. The rest of us are roaches. I know they don't know what that means, and I said it that way on purpose. Someday you have to come back and get the full story. But the point is, moths love the light, and roaches do not. So are you a moth, or are you a roach? That's the question. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. Welcome to MAMP Connects. Thank you. Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate that. Our champion sponsor extraordinaire over here. Thank you very much. We do have new people coming in, so I am going to reintroduce myself. My name is Jennifer Hutchins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Association of Nonprofits. We just had an amazing Together for Good day, I think. And I know, because all of you are amazing, and because all of the collective wisdom in this room generated a lot of great energy and ideas and built relationships. So thank you for participating for that. And so now we are going to have our MAMP Connects program, which we have been doing since April of 2020 in response to the need for all of us to go on lockdown and figure out what to do about our organizations. And so we started doing MAMP Connects as a Zoom format, and we did it once a week for 3 months at the height of the emergency. And then when we started to pull back a little bit, people kept saying, don't do that, keep doing it, keep connecting. So we have ever since. And then when we were able to, we had our first MAMP Connects live in 2023, and a bunch of you showed up, and the energy was fabulous. And so we decided we wanted to do it again, and today the topic is collaboration, because we've been talking about working together for good all day. And so thank you. We're going to be talking with a number of our peers who have experience with collaborating, and I just want to point out that what we're really interested here is the redefinition, really trying to dig into collaboration, because it's one of those ubiquitous words that take on different meanings depending on who you're talking to, and sometimes you're told to collaborate and you're like, how? What does that mean? And so we kind of want to dig into the meat, so we've invited 4 people to come and talk about it, and the first of those is going to be our can I get real with you guys for just a second? That was my daughter. Just called me on the phone, college student. Yeah, what? No, I am not taking this phone call, but it's just too funny because I just imagine many of you I'm supposed to be an empty nester, but my daughters are calling me on the phone in the middle of an event. Okay, anyway, so, thank you for letting me be real for just a second. So, we have invited Glenn Prickett, who is the CEO of Gulf of Maine Research Institute, to come and kick us off for MAMP Connects on this conversation around collaboration. Let me introduce you for a moment to Glenn. He joined the Gulf of Maine Research Institute as president and CEO of September of 2023. And he has served in a variety of environmental leadership roles over the course of his 35-year career. He most recently held the position of president and CEO at the World Environment Center. It's an organization promoting sustainable development in Europe, Latin America, and North America. He has served in roles at the Nature Conservancy, Conservation International, and the U.S. Agency on International Development. So please join me in welcoming Glenn Prickett. I'm not going to leave you with my daughter.
So I'll just say yes. How's that? Okay. I turned my phone off, by the way, so my kids can't bother me. They'll have to bother their mother. So thank you, Jen. It's really an honor to be here at GMRI. We are proud members of MANP. And Jen, you've become a good friend and been super welcoming as a new Mainer. So I appreciate that. And I know this is not the Oscars, not quite as exciting, but feel free to cue the walk-off music if I'm going on too long. I know we'd all appreciate that. So I was really honored when Jen asked me to come and talk about collaboration, and I'm eager to join the panel and hear about collaboration from my fellow panelists. It's a really exciting topic for me. I have been a student and a practitioner of collaboration my whole career, which is now 37 years, because my bio is now a couple of years old. And it's both the most impactful thing I've ever done and the hardest. And it's really why I came to Maine. So as a little bit of background, I did spend 35 years, the rest of my professional career in Washington, D.C. You're welcome. Sorry. I went there right out of college, very charged up to save the world, and the part of the world I was going to save was the climate and international development. So that's what I went there to do. And for 25 years, working with a variety of great organizations, we made a lot of progress. Then 2015 was really a high watermark when the world agreed on the Paris Agreement to combat climate change, where 150 countries came together, all committed to doing their best to address climate change, and then come back together every 5 years to do more and more. And we called it the ratchet. We were going to ratchet up progress on climate. Unfortunately, in the last 10 years, that ratchet at the international level is moving more and more and more slowly. And not only is international cooperation on climate change and sustainable development becoming difficult, but even national policy in this country on climate change and sustainable development is becoming very difficult. So I thought I wanted to repot myself and go to a place where people could still come together from all walks of life and a variety of different persuasions and really collaborate on solving problems for climate and sustainable development. And I am so fortunate to be in Maine, where that is still possible. And when I got a call from the Gulf of Maine Research Institute that they were looking for someone to succeed Don Perkins, their founding CEO, I jumped at the chance because collaborative is in our mission statement. We develop and deliver collaborative solutions to global ocean challenges. And I really think our blueprint for global progress on sustainable development, and you name the issue that you're here to work on, at this point in time is for people to come together in regions where we can still talk to one another, work together as hard as it is, make progress, and then network our solutions, share our solutions globally. And that's what we're committed to do at GMRI. Our commitment is here in the Gulf of Maine, but we do that with an eye toward sharing solutions to other parts of the country and other parts of the world. And for us at GMRI, for our mission, the Gulf of Maine, which is centered here in Maine, but reaches up to Atlantic Canada and down through Cape Cod, is such a fertile ground for creating those solutions. We have one of the most productive ocean ecosystems on the planet. Because our ecosystem is so productive, it has sustained a heritage of maritime economies for thousands of years, starting with the Wabanaki and then continuing through European settlement, and our economy is still heavily based on what we bring from the ocean. And because of all that, we have a really unique assembly of scientific expertise and technical expertise on all things ocean, and we have the very pragmatic mindset of coming together and figuring out what works. So it's a really powerful place to do this work. Now, I'm going to talk mostly today about some experiences I've had before I got here, because I wanted to kind of use the battle scars I've earned to share some lessons on how one can build successful collaboration. And I'll do that, but I'll also just then mention very quickly a few similar things we're doing at GMRI. But I want to focus on the things before, because that's where I was very involved and starting and running them. And the great collaboration we're doing at GMRI really predates me. So I worked for 11 organizations over 35 years, either as a staff or board member. I want to get every letter in the alphabet in an acronym before I retire. So if your organization has Z in it, like the American Zoological Association, we should talk, but not for a decade or so. And I learned early on that collaboration with strange bedfellows is the best way to have an impact and get things done. And I learned that in my very first job in Washington. I went down in 1988 out of college. I was hired at the Natural Resources Defense Council, and my assignment was to convince the World Bank and the US Agency for International Development to tackle climate change, to invest in clean energy and forest conservation. Now, as you can imagine, the minds weren't as open back then in the mid-1980s to tackling climate change. And at the World Bank, it was like a hard no. But at USAID, there were some people there who wanted to do those things, not necessarily for the climate, because they were good for the developing countries where they worked. So we persuaded the US Congress to demand that both the World Bank and USAID take action, but we didn't get very far at the World Bank. We got really far at USAID because there were people on the inside who were wanting to work with us, who shared an interest. So I realized that that kind of reaching across the aisle, collaborating with strange bedfellows is going to have more impact. But it's really hard. I think we all know this if we've tried to work out, even sometimes within our organizations, but certainly when we try to work outside our organizations. You're trying to build trust across cultures that are often inclined either to compete with one another. That's often true when you're trying to work with an NGO. Or if you're trying to work across sectors, particularly with the business community coming from an NGO, the cultural habit is to demonize one another, and that kind of goes in both directions. So it's super hard, and I think about something my father-in-law used to tell my wife when she was growing up. He's a very cynical guy, so it was meant mostly in jest, but he'd say, you know what, Lisa, no one's perfect but you and me, and sometimes I wonder about you. And so I think about that a lot with collaboration. You know, we hold people to very high standards, but sometimes, not that we have to lower our standards, but we got to kind of look with a longer vision and overlook some things that we might not otherwise like. So I'm going to, as quickly as I can, go through 5 lessons I've learned about what makes a successful collaboration, lessons I've learned the hard way, and I'm going to try to draw each one out of a story of a collaboration. Most of them worked, one didn't, and we'll get to that. Lesson number 1, you really need to start with a shared vision for impact that's rooted in each organization's strategic interests. And that sounds like a lot of jargon, but it's super important. A lot of times we try to do collaborations based on, you know, it feels like we should do something together, or I think I can get something out of that organization. Those are often not very impactful. So I'm going to tell you a story about a collaboration that I launched with Starbucks when I was at Conservation International. And the shared interest that we realized we had in common is we wanted to work with coffee growers in the tropics to cultivate high-quality, shade-grown coffee that could command a high price. Now, why did CI want to do that? Coffee grows in the tropics, often grows at altitudes that are very high in biodiversity. The traditional manner of cultivating coffee, often known as shade coffee, can be done in a compatible way with biodiversity. And then what unfortunately often happens is those traditional systems are uprooted, the forests are cut down, and the fields can be planted with lower quality coffee that grows faster and might be able to get a higher price locally because you have more to sell. But the highest quality coffee, high-grown Arabica, our view was, came out of these shade coffee systems. This was back in the mid-90s. The coffee industry hadn't necessarily acknowledged that. We thought that. So my boss, very entrepreneurial guy, Peter Seligman at CI, was continually pestering Howard Schultz at Starbucks that shade-grown coffee is the way to go, and they should be buying their coffee from the coffee farmers we were working with. So Howard, I think, got tired of all these pestering calls, and he sent his senior VP for coffee, which is a job I always wanted, Dave Olson, out to meet with us. And the meeting happened, I remember it so well. It was about 8 o'clock on a Sunday night in our office in Crystal City, Virginia, Arlington, Virginia, and it was freezing cold. So we're all sitting there on a Sunday night at 8 o'clock, like shivering in the office, and Peter and I are making our best pitch, and Matt Quinlan, our coffee manager, for why they should be buying our coffee. Dave wasn't really having it, but finally he said, fine, I'll send one of my top coffee buyers, Scott McMartin, down with you to any place you choose. So in our genius, we chose Chiapas, Mexico, which is a fantastic place. This happened to be at the height of the Zapatista uprising. So the folks at Starbucks weren't super thrilled about that, but they agreed to go along. So Scott McMartin and a couple of people from their environmental department kind of packed up and went with us down there. The Starbucks people were so worried about it that they hired a security team. And the security team were former Navy SEALs who had been President George H.W. Bush's security detail. So it was a little bit of overkill. They were teaching us like evasive maneuvers, and they were driving around in heavily armored vehicles. Although we weren't in the heavily armored vehicles, the Starbucks people were in the heavily armored vehicles. So we were kind of the decoys. Anyway, but it was a real breakthrough. It was kind of a wild trip through the mountains of Chiapas. We were focused on the El Triunfo Biosphere Reserve, where some of this fantastic high-grown Arabica originates. And if it taught me one thing, it's that it is really difficult, very hard physically to be a coffee grower, because the fields are basically like this. And these men and women just go up and down these hills all day long. And I think I went up maybe one or two and I was spent. So came back with incredible respect for the people who grow coffee in El Triunfo. And fortunately, we came back with an agreement from Scott that he would try one container of the coffee. So that was our first win. They'd buy one container. Turned out the container was fantastic, sold very well. I still have a pound of those original beans. God forbid anyone ever roasts them. I can't imagine what they would taste like. But that led to $1 million investment the next year, so we could give loans to the coffee growers so they wouldn't have to sell to the local coyote middlemen. They could sell direct to Starbucks. And in about 4 years, we had worked with them on a procurement standard, Coffee and Farmer Equity. If you go on their website today, I did just to double check, they're very proud that 100% of their coffee worldwide is now sourced against these Coffee and Farmer Equity principles, and they buy 30% of the coffee in the world, so it's a significant impact. So that partnership with Conservation International is still going. It's over 25 years now. Millions of lives and acres around the world have been conserved. And I'm super proud of that. I haven't been involved with it probably for 15 of those 25 years, but really exciting partnership. At GMRI, we actually have a similar arrangement with Ahold Delhaize. And again, this predates me. I can't claim any credit for it, but our seafood team partners with Ahold Delhaize, which is the parent company of Hannaford and Stop and Shop and Giant Foods, where I used to live down in Virginia, and Food Lion. And so we help them source sustainably harvested seafood. So we play a similar role to what CI did with Starbucks. So another example of that shared vision for impact. Lesson number 2, you got to be really clear about the comparative advantages that you and your partner or partners bring to the table. And a story I'll tell here is about a partnership that we formed when I was at the Nature Conservancy with the Environmental Defense Fund. And you might think, oh, that's big, what's the big deal to environmental organizations working together on climate change? I've often found it's harder to work with other NGOs in my space than it is to work with companies and other sectors. And we can talk over cocktails about why that is, but suffice it to say that can be the case. So our shared interest, our mission was to build bipartisan support in Congress for climate action. Believe it or not, this is back in 2012, 2013. That was still something we could do. Hopefully we will be able to do that again very soon. And I remember where this one started too. I was in National Airport in Washington. I got a call from my friend Diane Regas at the Environmental Defense Fund. She had just come out of a meeting with the MacArthur Foundation in Chicago with their new environment director, Jorgen Thompson. And I knew Jorgen because we had worked together at Conservation International. He had gone to MacArthur to run their global conservation program. Well, there was a board coup. The new board said, we're not doing global biodiversity conservation anymore, we're doing climate action. So Jorgen, bring us a slate of grants for climate action. So this had just happened. Diane had just been meeting with him, and she said, Glenn, I think TNC and EDF together, because we both have Republican supporters, should go in and pitch a big combined program to build Republican support for climate action, which I thought was a great idea. TNC and EDF hadn't worked together before. It wasn't obvious like how that would go. But the real breakthrough was when we got our teams together. We had a series of strategy meetings. We figured out a theory of change, and importantly, we figured out like how we complement one another very clearly. So we both had Republican supporters, but they were different. Our Republican supporters were mostly trustees of our state chapters. So here in Maine, we have TNC Maine. My joke at the Nature Conservancy when I worked there was we had as many Republican trustees in the states as Democrats. If we could agree on a national policy issue, we could probably get it through Congress because a lot of our trustees in the states had good relationships with their Republican members. EDF's support was mainly the business community, national business leaders. So we agreed on a division of labor. We decided to focus on 10 purple states, places like Arizona, Colorado, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, which, believe it or not, a decade ago was still a purple state. And we would work together in those states to try to surround Republican members of Congress with voices they believed in and listened to who could encourage them to get into the yes column on climate and out of the no column. And our focus was on mobilizing our trustees, and we needed funding to build up advocacy capacity because that's not really what TNC did. EDF's focus was mobilizing business leaders, and they needed funding to really build out a business coalition. And we did that, and it was successful. We got members in all of those states, 10 states, to commit to take action on climate. They joined the Congressional Climate Solutions Caucus. They voted yes on sort of building block policies like, this is Washington wonkery, but 45Q, if you've heard about that, which was a tax credit provision to encourage carbon sequestration. So it was a great example, and together we raised, I think, $35 million for a 6-year program that had real impact in its time. So comparative advantage is clearly important. We have an example of that at GMRI we call LENI, Learning Ecosystems Northeast. It's I think now a 10-year program with currently $15 million in funding from NASA, where we are very clear that we play a network administrator role, and we partner with educators across northern New England to help get their students out into nature studying the impact of climate change. But the network runs very well because everybody understands their role in the program. Lesson number 3, and I'll try to speed up a little bit here, is always have what I would call an abundance mindset, a belief that we can gain more together than we can competing separately. Or as Ben Franklin said, we should all hang together lest we hang separately. And my example here is something we call the International Conservation Partnership. This was a collaborative effort of Conservation International, the Nature Conservancy, World Wildlife Fund, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. And the goal was to build bipartisan support in Congress, this time for foreign aid for conservation. Now think about it. Foreign aid, never popular. Foreign aid for conservation, like why would any member of Congress want to vote for that? But there had been a AID and World Bank program for conservation for a long time. Each of our organizations depended on a lot of that money. We got very good at lobbying for our own earmarks, for our own projects. When the George W. Bush administration took office in 2000, all of our organizations were very worried that foreign aid was going to be cut, that these environmental foreign aid programs would be the first on the block. So my colleague, Nick Lapham at Conservation International, had the idea, let's get these 4 organizations together and lobby as a group. And we all agreed to do it. The real breakthrough was when our lobbyists came up with something called the International Conservation Budget, which was an annual report on the most important foreign aid programs that funded conservation. And then each organization had case studies in the report, so we could show off our own cool projects, but come together and lobby for the amounts that these agencies needed. And it was a very successful way for about 20 years to get the appropriations committees of the House and the Senate to every year insist that a significant amount of our foreign assistance go to biodiversity conservation in a way that worked with local communities. GMRI and partners here in Maine, we're starting up something like this. We call it MOVE, Maine's Ocean Voices Engage. So it's a group of about 10 ocean research and impact organizations. And we're focusing on the Maine congressional delegation because we have 2 very important appropriators, Susan Collins and Shelley Pingree. And we're working together to create Maine's ocean budget so we can together encourage them to ensure that this administration sustains funding for ocean science. My 4th lesson is make sure you have top leadership commitment. And here I'm going to tell a tale of 2 mergers, one that failed and one that worked. So the one that failed was a proposed merger between Conservation International and the Nature Conservancy. And my boss, Peter Seligman at CI, and Steve McCormick at the Nature Conservancy had grown up together at TNC in California. And then CI split, and it was very acrimonious, and the two organizations really didn't like each other. But Peter and Steve, when Steve became CEO, said, let's remerge, because CI is really good internationally, TNC is really good domestically, and together we can have a real powerhouse for global conservation. I remember when I got the call about that, I was driving on a really bumpy road in Venezuela, and I had to dial in to a CI leadership meeting, and Peter said, oh, we're going to merge with TNC, and we were all like, oh, okay, sounds all right. Unfortunately, on the TNC side, they weren't so happy about it, and ultimately the boards didn't really share the vision. They saw it more transactionally, that they could get access to each other's money. So that merger fell apart because we didn't have board-level commitment. Fast forward to 2023, as I was leaving the World Environment Center, when I told my board chair that, he began to think, oh, interesting. Maybe instead of replacing Glenn, we should think about a merger. So the boards came together of World Environment Center and Wildlife Habitat Council, two small NGOs that worked with business on sustainable development. Wildlife Habitat Council's focus was on the biodiversity of corporate properties. Our focus was what companies could do outside of their properties for sustainable development, and together it would be a great combination. So the two boards came together to work that out. The other CEO was supportive. She would ultimately become the combined CEO, so that worked, and I was leaving. But more importantly, the boards, through a really rigorous process, came to see that this would work, and they introduced it in a phased way. And as a result, new name Tandem Global is now a very successful combination of those two organizations. So the key is, as good as your ideas, if you don't have your top boss's support for it, it won't work. And then the final lesson I want to leave you with is, and I think this is something we'll talk a lot about on the panel. Oh, and I should say at GMRI we have no mergers on the horizon, so I have no GMRI example to share on that. Managing the relationship to build trust. This is probably the most important of all the five, and we all know how important trust is. And the example I'm going to give here may create some intakes of breath. So at TNC, we started a partnership with Dow Chemical. So you can imagine how that would play with staff of both organizations, really, a conservation organization working with a global chemical company. But the idea was to show the value of business investing in nature. And Dow actually has quite a history of being at the forefront of corporate sustainability goals. They're very proud of their corporate sustainability goals. They create business value. So I remember where I was when this started. I was actually in my kitchen in Virginia. I hadn't even started at the Nature Conservancy yet. I was just about to start, and I got a call from the director of the Michigan chapter, and she said, Glenn, this is Helen. You don't know me, but I just came out of a meeting with Neil Hawkins at Dow. He says he knows you. He knows you're coming to the Nature Conservancy. He wants Dow to work with TNC to figure out how to incorporate the value of nature into business decisions. What do you think? Helen had gone in to look for a grant for the Michigan chapter, but she saw this could be a really big impact project. So we ran with it. And it started because Neil and I had known each other and trusted one another, but then we had to bring our teams together. So we built core teams that were inclined to want to work together. We had to do a lot of work to get our larger organizations to come on board on both sides. They didn't trust an NGO getting into their business. Our NGO scientists didn't trust a big international chemical company. But the real breakthrough, we thought we were doing well, but we had a meeting at their headquarters in Midland, Michigan, where we really put on the table the things that weren't working in the relationship. And it was a really painful and uncomfortable meeting. It took about 2 days. But we worked through those immediate issues, and we came out of it with a new protocol for monthly meetings where we would run through everything we were doing, and we would be relentless about putting problems on the table that we could solve before they grew into real, or challenges that we could solve before they grew into real problems. So that turned out to be a very effective collaboration. It went on for 5 years. It was a $10 million partnership, and we started with pilot investments in nature in Texas and Pennsylvania and Brazil. That led to the creation of a tool that allows any company to evaluate the value of investments in natural capital. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the collaboration, Dow had the world's first corporate goal to generate $1 billion in value through investing in nature conservation. And if you work in the conservation arena, you would know that this is becoming sort of the next wave of corporate sustainability is investments in nature, and it really got its start in that partnership. So those are the 5 lessons I want to leave you with. Thank you for allowing me to go on so long. I'm really inspired by what everyone in our Maine NGO community is doing. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
That was great. A lot to unpack there. The themes of trust, relationship building, also getting your board in line with and shared leadership. Really, really helpful. Thank you so much. I'm going to welcome the rest of you up. Our other three panelists to the stage, Hallie, Jeannette, and Marpheen. I am super excited to have these three individuals joining us this afternoon for some shared. Let me introduce the rest of them. Hallie is a paddler, hiker, runner, skier, baker, goofball, and big dreamer. Wow, that's a lot.
A lot to juggle.
Not only that, they can teach you how to bake cinnamon buns over coals, write a poem, eat like a dinosaur. Okay.
If you stick around long enough.
Carnivorous or?
All of the
All of them. Wow, awesome. Or stand on your head in a canoe. Before co-founding Kindling Collective as the co-director, they taught middle and high school humanities for a decade in Boston, Baltimore, and Portland. This one.
Yeah.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah. The right one.
Always centering inclusive, empowering, student-driven learning environments. A registered Maine guide. What? Oh my gosh. Wow, the list goes on, folks. This is a very talented person. A registered Maine guide, wilderness medicine instructor, and a whitewater canoeing instructor. Hallie has led backcountry canoeing backpacking trips since 2007. All over the place, everywhere. Really cool. And they grew up in Damariscotta, Maine. Welcome, Hallie.
Thank you.
Jeannette Andre is the CEO of Maine Philanthropy Center. She has served as the president and CEO of Maine Philanthropy Center since 2019. An experienced leader. Actually, what I don't see in here, Jeannette, is you are now an award-winning 40 under 40.
It's true.
Maine Biz leader.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I didn't see that in here.
Awardee, Marpheen.
Yes, but I haven't gotten to Marpheen yet, Jeannette. It's still all about you. An experienced leader with over a decade work in nonprofit and philanthropy field, Jeannette brings a deep commitment to equity in her work. In her role at MPC, she's committed to centering humanity, cultivating authentic relationships, and advocating for the sector. She serves on the board of CEI and the steering committee for the Maine Economic Development Strategy, and we are so excited that she decided to raise her family here in Portland, Maine. Thank you.
I'm also on the MANP board.
Oh, and your bio obviously needs a little work.
It really does.
And we are very proud that she is on the board of the Maine Association of Nonprofits. Thank you, Jeannette. Okay, and then we have Marpheen. Marpheen Chann is the executive director and founder of Khmer, Maine. He is an award-winning author, writer, thinker, canoeer. Oh no, sorry, that was Hallie. Advocate and speaker. He has a memoir, Moon in Full, that has won a Bronze Award for LGBTQ nonfiction and was a finalist for the Maine Literary Awards and the Eric Hoffer Book Award. He became the first Cambodian American elected official in Maine in 2021 when he was elected as an at-large charter commissioner for the city of Portland, Maine, and served 5 years in Portland's planning board from 2020 to 2025. Please join me in welcoming all three.
Welcome.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to ask our panelists some questions for the next few minutes, and then right about 4 o'clock, I'm going to invite all of you to ask questions of any one of these folks, including Glenn. So feel free to start thinking about that. We'll pass around a microphone starting about 4 o'clock. But I'm going to start with Hallie. Hi.
Hello.
The name Kindling Collective itself suggests itself. It suggests connection and shared purpose. And so as a co-founder of Kindling Collective, Do you find that there's a little bit of a challenge?
It can be hard to say.
Yeah, it can be a little
there's
hard to say.
rule.
Okay. What role did that spirit of collaboration play in shaping the kind of organization you were creating?
Yeah, from the beginning, we decided to call ourselves Kindling Collective as 2 people. So we were a very small collective to start out. But from the beginning, we wanted to make sure that we were adding to what was happening in Maine. So Kindling Collective is a queer-centered outdoor gear library and education center based here in Portland. And there's a lot of different organizations in the state who are working to reduce barriers to outdoor access. And so from the beginning, we wanted to connect with them to make sure we were adding to what they were doing and working together towards that shared goal instead of competing. And so we set up meetings before we even existed with Queerly Me, with Portland Gear Hub, with Maine Gear Share, and there's a moment from one of those early meetings with Maine Gear Share stands out to me. We were worried that they would feel like we were competing with them because we were another gear library, and one of the staff members said to us, we all need to be working towards this goal. Like, we're all working towards the same thing, and like there is no competition when we're all coming at this from different angles. And so one of our collaborators, who is an artist who does work under the name Radical Imprints, Nicole Manginelli, has a print that I just keep thinking about that says, work with the tools that are uniquely yours. And I keep thinking about that with this conversation around collaboration, which is we all have tools, skills, privileges, access to different things. And if we're working towards the same goals, but we can bring the tools that are ours, then that leads to collaboration and more effective problem solving. So I think that's kind of been our take from the beginning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Reminds me a lot of what Glenn was saying about competitive advantage, right?
Totally.
Comparative advantage,
yeah. Microphone here. So Jeannette, the Maine Philanthropy Center founded the Readiness and Response Fund that was designed to help nonprofits act quickly in moments of crisis and change. How did collaboration, both among funders and with grassroots partners, shape the design and rollout of the fund? What did you learn about balancing speed, equity, and partnership?
I'm going to aspire to be as succinct as Hallie. They did such a lovely job modeling answering a question well and thoroughly. I think this might be a little bit of an annoying response to your question, Jen, but the work that led into launching the Readiness and Response Fund really started like 4 or 5 years before we were able to launch it. And there were so many pieces that Glenn had mentioned that built the condition for us to be able to be kind of a trusted steward and the place for funders and nonprofits to look for that type of support. And so some of those things were, we built a lot of, well, our vision statement has the word collaboration in it. So way back when we were thinking about our vision, it was really acknowledging the interdependence of all of us in the sector and identifying the intersections of our work with other folks. And really like thinking about the world that we wanted to happen and holding the hope, but living in the reality and taking tiny steps to make our reality happen. And so some of that was like creating relationships with Just Fund, who is a tool that is a common application. We knew like 4 years ago that we wanted to use this as a tool for philanthropy to make it easier for nonprofits to access money. And we just couldn't find the right timing for it, but we managed and maintained that relationship over the course of time. We also invested money and resources into collaboration way back when, and so we started facilitating funder groups that moved the culture of some philanthropy, not all philanthropy, to come together to align funding or collaborate on funding projects. We hired Tyler Kidder, who is our funder network manager, and so I think that collaboration is such an under-resourced thing. Like, it takes time, and time is also money in our sector. And so we really realized that we couldn't just like do this work really well unless we actually resourced it in the way that allowed us to do and empowered us to do that. It was a constant practice too. Like, collaboration was leading into the Readiness Response Fund. It was about like making sure that in so many ways we were ensuring that we had collaborative practices in our work. And so like, I like to think about like, I tore my ACL after skiing for 2 times. And I, like, between when I tore it and when I had the surgery, it was like 2 months, but all of my muscles atrophied. Like, it was crazy how your body just like figures out how to like use the things that it needs to do and forget the things that it doesn't need. And so when I was like relearning how to walk correctly, I was thinking about like how this happens in our work as well. If it's like not something that we're nurturing and paying attention to, then it falls by the wayside. And so it takes a lot of time and energy, and a reminder that a collaborative mindset is an additive piece to our work. And finally, like in those relationships, we built credibility and positionality for like being a place where folks saw us as a trusted and safe space to manage and steward these funds. And so we also brought in other funders to help us guide the design of it. We brought in our relationships with community members to tell us what they were actually needing. We did the thing that we've been asking funders to do all the time, which is like give general operating support. If we could have made it multi-year, we also would have done that. But let me know if you are interested in helping us invest in that way, because there's opportunity. But we really tried to embody the practices that we have been advocating for across the field over my tenure and my predecessor's tenure here, and leveraging all our relationships to make it happen. And so I think we've given out $570,000, which is like not nothing. It's really big for us. And we've already also given folks the tools to be able to respond to to invest in the practices that they identify as important to responding to in this moment. So the fund was primarily to support organizations who had either been targeted by the federal government, had been on the receiving end of harassment and terrible national language. It was also for organizations who had had their grants cut because they were committed to environmental justice. And really trying to focus that on organizations who maybe didn't have the relationships with funders predominantly, because we knew, or we had a feeling that those organizations could tap into their relationships and be on the receiving end of some responsive funding. We really wanted to find organizations who are doing incredibly important work in their community, but maybe hadn't created those sustainable relationships with grant makers yet. So. And we also made some mistakes, and we were pretty, I think, transparent about it. We wanted it to be a rolling fund, but then that just like wasn't within the capacity of the organization, and it also wasn't within the way that we were seeing applications roll in. And so allowing for some differently positioned organizations to invest or to apply, space was really, and time was really important for that. And so we were pivoting at many different points, but I think that the solid trust and relationship that we had out in the community allowed us to be able to do that well. And I think that I'll leave it there, Jen.
Thank you, Jeannette. Marpheen, how about you? From your perspective, what makes collaboration? How do you make it strategic and capable of driving real change? What's your perspective? You've heard a lot from your co-panelists here. What are you thinking about over there?
I'll say get ready to cry a lot.
Got some tissues?
I only say that because I was wondering why the tissues were here just for me. Because I don't think they have tissues. No.
As I age, and if I'm nervous, my nose runs, so I know that about myself, so I've positioned a tissue here.
That's what it was. Strategically positioned the tissues here.
But if anyone doesn't get a tissue, you're welcome.
I used to be, before I became executive director of Khmer, Maine, I was very much sort of more of the consultant type, or the, lone wolf, bumping around, helping everybody. And so it wasn't until I got into this role and some other manager roles where I finally understood this is why sometimes when I approach, when I was in my consulting hat, when I approach organizations or different groups and I ask them to be involved in something, why they are sometimes hesitant, because they're also thinking about their capacity, their staff's capacity. As someone who has 2 staff currently who are now asking for additional staff, the very people that I saw, 5+ years ago who weren't necessarily able to jump on at that time. So I would say one of the strategic things you can do is when you enter into conversations, you might be the excited one, but you also have to be aware that the other person on the other side might not have all the resources to be able to be a full partner at the table. And so what I actually do now when I still do the same thing. I still recruit people to be on board a bunch of different ideas and projects, but I offer a handful of options. One, you can be really involved, which means you're on call for me, like night and day, as Jeannette knows. Or you can let me know you want to be involved and be informed, and you're there, but I'm not expecting you to be on call, for instance. I think partnerships oftentimes run it by that same old book of like, everyone needs to be equally committed, everyone needs to be equally invested, and if they're not going to be, then they have no business being part of this partnership. But if we think about partnerships in different tiers or different sort of circles, concentric circles, then it actually allows people to be more involved without overtaxing their capacity or their staff members and team members getting mad because they're overburdened with work. And so that's one of the strategic things that I do. And I think overall, mission alignment definitely, Glenn, like you said, and values alignment is very important. Because values, if you don't have values alignment and mission alignment, when a conflict pops up, you have nothing to ground that partnership and sustain that partnership. But when you're aligned on values, you always have that out. If you're fighting about a tactic or a strategy, and things get really heated, you can always circle back. Okay, what's the shared values that we have, and let's reground in that, and then it really does a lot of work to bring the tension down and the conflict to have it simmer down. So that's what I'll say on that.
Thank you, Marpheen. Hallie, I'm going to come back to you. Speaking of conflict, you have your organization operates with a co-director model. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. That's something that we have in our sector talk about is, are there other ways of sharing the burden of running some of these community organizations? So how has that been for you? What kind of lessons are you learning? How do you make decisions together? How do you deal with the challenges and benefits that come with that?
Yeah, so my co-director and co-founder is also my spouse. So right over there. So we get to add all sorts of fun dynamics into that. But I think, I honestly can't imagine doing this work another way. I feel really grateful to, sometimes Eva talks about, like, Eva is my co-director over there and spouse. When I'm out in the field leading a trip, they say I feel like half my brain is gone. And that's kind of how I feel as well, that we really operate as a team and we're able to, I think it really helps that I respect them a lot, and we have shared values. So coming back to the idea of collaboration, I don't think we could do this if we didn't have shared values. And so I can't imagine being the one making a decision by myself. I really, have a lot of respect for folks who are in that ED role, and it just, from the beginning, as I talked about earlier, we wanted to be responsive to community, and so when we're making decisions, we want to be listening to the people who are most impacted by those decisions. And so having another person who's tapped into our community is really helpful to be like, is this a good idea? Does this feel aligned? And then kind of going out beyond that, we're fiscally sponsored, which allows us to be a little bit more creative in our structure. And so instead of a governing board, we have an accountability board. And that accountability board is kind of another layer of, that's community members who are helping us make decisions and helping us make sure our decisions are accountable to our community. And as we've added more staff, we're continuing, like we've always wanted to be as non-hierarchical as possible in our structure, in our decision making. I think a fear of mine, one of my greatest fears, is that I will become out of touch and end up being one of those founders or directors who are making decisions that aren't actually responsive to or caring for community. And so I feel a lot of gratitude for having those like many layers of accountability, the co-director, our staff who are involved in decision making, our accountability board, our instructors, and then our community also give us, we invite a lot of feedback. So I think we're constantly trying to seek and listen to multiple perspectives when making decisions.
And I also hear in that you really created this from the get-go.
Yeah.
Was centering that idea of a input from the community. A lot of times we end up finding ourselves needing to collaborate, and there isn't that initial agreement right away.
Yeah.
So it's just it's really interesting to see how it started out with that intention. Jeannette, recently, our two organizations have begun deepening our relationship, exploring different ways we can collaborate. How's that going?
How's that going for you, Jen? Yeah.
I'm not a panelist, Jeannette.
Well, when I first met Jen, we were at a coffee shop for the Proper Cup, and one of the first things she said to me was like, "I'm not holding any of the baggage that our predecessors had." And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, because I had one crossover day with the ED of MPC before they had to leave. So I was like, oh, okay, cool, neither am I, right? And so I think there's like a history of our organizations, and I think you touched upon this, or maybe it was Hallie touched upon this, this like constant need to push back against this competitive or protective stance, right? I have to uniquely identify my role everywhere and can't confuse it by bringing in partnership or collaboration, because then that kind of waters down the value that I add. And I say something that maybe drives that, or funder behavior, right? Oops, it's okay. And so, for me, it's been really important to create a closer relationship with the Maine Association of Nonprofits, because we recognize that we are interdependent as a sector and as a field, right? That what you're doing impacts funders, and what funders are doing definitely impacts nonprofits. And so, if we pretend that it doesn't matter, then the depth of our ability to make change in the world is gonna be so shallow. And it's just been such a pleasure for me to be able to get to know you and your team more, to think about, envision, how can we create a shared vision, or shared platforms for the sector. I think we started collaborating with a shared staff member. We had a shared advocacy staff member, Sarah Skillen-Woodard. And then ultimately you needed somebody full-time, whatever. You got Mary Alice, and she's amazing. But we also committed to be on each other's board, right? And so Jen is the governance chair and the secretary right now of the MPC board, and I get to just hang out and be on the governance board of MANP. But it's it is about continuing to nurture understanding and relationship, and also the influencing, I don't know how measurable it is, but I think that there is a lot of influencing on each other that we have, in addition to being oh my God, can you believe this happened in this, being a peer support person. So I think it has been really, really a really good experience for MPC, and really important in terms of how we think about how we lead the field of philanthropy.
Yeah, thanks, Jeannette. And the one thing I want to elevate there again which is just a theme that keeps coming up all day today, but also Glenn and Hallie and Jeannette are all saying this, is it takes time. It just takes time. and to build those relationships. And I know several times when Jeannette and I have had a conversation, it kind of results in, well, let's have lunch. Like, what's the next step? Well, let's get our teams together and have a meal. And then we'll come back later and we'll say, well, let's try this, and it really does take that time and taking those baby steps. Marpheen, you have helped spearhead the formation of something called the Southeast Asian Collaborative, Maine. Another way of collaborating are actually coalitions that come together. Can you talk about that work and the advantages to working in that coalition space?
Yeah, it's another thing I'll add to tie to the other question too is don't be afraid of the mess. In some ways, adapt, and I know Jen and Jeannette have kids, so adapt sort of a childlike wonder approach. Don't make too much of a mess, but don't be afraid of the mess because relationships are messy. I'm not married, but I have a lot of friends who are married, and I watch their marriages. There's a honeymoon phase, right? Everyone knows the honeymoon phase, and then you really get to know each other. You fight things out, and then if it's a good marriage, it works out, and then the rest of your life is a little bit more level. I think.
Don't go to bed angry.
Don't go to bed angry. Number one rule that I don't follow, especially during these times when there's a lot of news. But what I'll say is don't be afraid of the mess. And then once you enter into, for us it's a collaborative. I think coalition is a little overused, but the collaborative started with my relationship that I had built over half a decade with the Filipino community. The partnerships that I find successful are ones that are slow burn. Like I might have met the person 10 years ago. We might have been met at different fundraisers or different events over the course of 10 years, and then all of a sudden there's something that we need to do. Those are my favorite kinds of partnerships. I think a lot of times we think of partnerships as let's just get in the room in a meeting on that Teams, on that Zoom. Let's get an agreement after an hour that we're going to work together. But with the Southeast Asian Collaborative, it's really a tough job because you're talking about not only Khmer, Cambodian, or the Filipino groups, but you also want representation from Vietnamese, Thai, Lao, Hmong, Indonesian, Malaysian, and yes, there are community members from those different ethnicities here in Maine. And for me, people always ask, how do you do it? And I was like, well, I don't just rely on my own devices. I talk with other people, listen to other people is another important thing. And with the Filipino community, we made a little bit of a splash in the Southeast Asian community with C-Fest last year, that in Riverbank of Westbrook. We started that as just a Khmer New Year because it was just Khmer, Maine that was fairly visible and able to fundraise for an event like that. But the third year I said, let's do something different. Let's pull in the Filipino community. Let's call it the Southeast Asian Festival. And there I fundraised for 99.9% of it so that they didn't feel like they were on the hook. And they were able to become visible. And when they became visible, their community members were inspired to get more involved. They mobilized more to the point where both of our communities are showing up fully together, which is then domino effect. The other communities are excited about this as well. So we have a representative from Indonesia, a representative from Malaysia, from Hmong, and then of course you have folks who are multiracial, who are Khmer Vietnamese or Lao Cambodian. But by embracing the mess and figuring out this is going to be hard, then you're giving yourself the mental and emotional armor to be able to last through through the mess and through the ups and downs. I think that answered your question, right?
Yeah. Oh, look. Oh.
I'll go after.
Okay, great. No, I was just thinking about, I think something that we haven't explicitly named, but you were referencing, and I think a few of us have referenced, is that collaboration requires, I mean, I think true collaboration and relationship building requires us to name and leverage access to power and access to resources. So you're talking about how you fundraise in order to allow, like, to invite this other group in without asking them to do that labor, and now they're like part of this group and y'all can do that work together. And I was just thinking about, yeah, I mean, Kindling Collective is a white-led nonprofit. Like, I grew up in Maine. I have access to resources that, and networks through my privileges that other folks that we collaborate with don't necessarily have. And so in order to do real collaboration, like, I have to access those and work to, in conversation, not like deciding I know what's best for another community. But yeah, I think working to access those resources and then pass on those resources, pass on those connections, and help all of us. Again, we're all working towards the same goal. So yeah, I don't know if that was especially articulate, but I just think like naming those and leveraging that access to resource and power. And I think another piece of that is, like, you were talking in your initial talk about avoiding competition versus collaboration. And I think it can be scary to give, it can feel like giving up resources sometimes when you are, giving the name of a funder or sharing with another, like, aligned organization a grant that you applied for, because what if they get it and I don't? And I think, but we have to do that. And also that's an invented scarcity. Like, there is actually enough for all of us. So anyway, yeah.
Jeannette, did you want to build on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, like, 3 of the people on the stage are tenants at the ECC.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to say that I'm a member
Can you say
of,
what the ECC
Oh, the
is,
Equality Community Center on 15 Casco Street. Come do a grant research appointment or visit any of the other wonderful
And then get your gear.
organizations.
Yeah.
Get your gear, go to the thrift shop. There's lots of different things to do.
We get our gear from Kindling Collective too.
Yeah.
That is a hard word to say.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marpheen.
But I just think, like, proximity matters, right? Like, showing up matters. Like, it's part of being, like, collaboration is being in community with each other. And so, like, in the ways in which you can, like, bring the people closer to you, like, that really helps. Like, I see Marpheen frequently, not every day, but very frequently. And did I say yes when he asked me to be on the steering committee for the Asian American Community Center? I absolutely did, in part because we had built a really strong relationship. He's on my board. I see him all the time. I see the good work that he's doing. And so it, like, just draws you in ways that you might not have if you are thinking very narrowly about how your mission area and how you do your work.
Thank you. Glenn, I didn't ask you to do this, so I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but I'm going to give you an opportunity just to reflect back a little bit on what some of the other folks have been sharing since your remarks.
I was taking really careful notes.
Well,
Bring it home.
Just a chance. I'm giving you a little airtime, Glenn.
Yeah, thank you. I
But
appreciate
before
that.
you start, I'm just going to remind everyone that then I'm going to turn it to the audience for some questions. So we'll turn up the lights so that you can see each other, and I'm going to turn to you guys next. But then I just want to give Glenn a second to share any reflections that might be popping up for him.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, thank you. And this has really been fascinating. Maybe I'll just underscore something I heard from each of you. I mean, I love embrace the mess. That hadn't occurred to me before, because it's scary and painful. And you feel like, oh no, not everything's going right, and this is a problem, and we've got to fix it. But just to go in recognizing that that's going to happen and just be okay with it and then work your way through it. That's really powerful. And what you just said about recognizing the power dynamics and realizing that sometimes if you're in the power up dynamic, you need to kind of put your resources and your access to power in service of your partners. That's absolutely true. And then if you're in the power down position, this is often the case when NGOs are collaborating with corporates, because the corporates have all the money and often they're funding the collaborative work. It takes a lot of courage and nerve to stand up to that and say, no, something's wrong here and this relationship isn't working. And that's scary, but you got to do it, because if you don't, sometimes the corporate knows that they're being inappropriate in the power relationship. Other times they don't. You know, that's just how they're used to operating with business partners or vendors or whatever. And you got to say, I'm not a vendor. You know, you can't just tell me what to do. This is a partnership, and I'm bringing equity to this.
And even ideally with a vendor, it's also a partnership.
Right, right. But in a lot of these bigger old school companies, you know, they're used to just telling people what to do because they have the money, and so you got to be able to stand up to that. And then your last point about proximity, just showing up. Like one of my mentors in politics said, there are 5 rules of politics, and I've actually forgotten the 5 because the first one is show up, like be there. That's like it's just so important. You got to just spend time together. And what it made me think is that I was looking back over all of the examples I gave, like one of the breakthroughs I hadn't thought about until that moment was we took trips together out into the field to see the work we were doing and meet with the people we were, you know, partnering with in the field. And that really went a long way toward reminding us about the shared values, the shared vision, and like building a relationship that could sustain, you know, the hard times.
Yeah, so many of our partnerships have come from people who've come to our programs as participants, and then like they run a nonprofit or they do this thing that we now connect and do together. Yeah, good point.
Great. Okay, now it's your turn. Questions from the audience. Whoever has one, if we have microphones, and if you can introduce yourself and let us know if you're addressing a particular person. Thank you. John's coming around with a microphone. Let us know if you have it for everybody or a particular person.
Thank you all so much. This has been really, really wonderful. So my question is for all of you.
Do you mind telling us who you are?
My name, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Samantha Hackney, and I work as a consultant at Marigold Strategy and supporting MANP right now as well. So my question is, sorry, I wrote it down, so apologies, but because you all touched upon this a little bit, but with all the recent attacks that's been happening on the nonprofit sector and shifts in the funding landscape, what specific collaborative practices do you hope to see that actively redistribute power and resources rather than reinforcing existing hierarchies? And how can collaboration move beyond just coordination to really genuine solidarity through risk-taking?
Is that for everyone?
That's for everyone. Okay. Anyone can answer. You don't all have to answer either.
It's a fabulous question.
I've got 2 thoughts.
Go for it.
One, so thank you. I mean, that's what we're all like staying up at night thinking about is like, what are we going to do? And like the world is sort of disintegrating around us. Thankfully not here in Maine yet, but at a national level. One thing I mentioned in my talk, we're bringing together a coalition of ocean organizations to lobby collectively our congressional delegation to stand up for science funding in the federal budget, and our vision is to then connect that with other states so we have a really effective national coalition, because we shouldn't just sort of take it on the chin, right? I mean, this country and this world has invested in science, and it's been tremendously valuable. We can't just walk away from that. So, we need to collectively make that voice. What I'm going to say, and Liz Scott, my Chief Development Officer, is in the room, and she's going to shoot daggers at me. So we're all figuring out, okay, if we're not going to get all the public money anymore, how do we get more private money? And there's going to be kind of a musical chairs game, because there isn't enough private philanthropy in the world to replace what's being cut in the public funding. So we're all figuring out how we can be as competitive as possible as we go out and look for those resources. But I think at some point soon, we're going to have to stop in our respective issue areas and say, right, how do we do this so it's not just like zero-sum competition? And how can we kind of lift all boats through some sort of collaborative fundraising for our sectors? So I don't think any of us, I don't know. I would love to hear if anyone's doing that now. At least in my world, we're all still sort of in the panic and figure out what to do mode.
Jeannette, or go ahead. Either, it doesn't matter. I just know Jeannette thinks about this a lot, but Hallie, you can say something.
I mean, I think that I have a couple of thoughts, right? Like from the funding perspective, like what I hope to see philanthropy doing is mobilizing more resources, mobilizing more than the bare minimum of 5%, right? Like that we are sitting on a lot of money. It's still not enough money to solve all of the challenges that we're faced with right now, but there is a lot of money out there that is being held in endowments and in donor advised funds that I think that we could mobilize and make a real difference with. Thinking about other practices like participatory grant making or investing in pooled funds, like things that take the power and decision making away from like few folks and allow more influence to the many, and those primarily like most impacted by issues. And then another, like, I think this is like a waterfall effect of funder practices, is like having funders invest in different organizational models and investing in collaboration and resource. Like something that has been very obvious from our relationship with MANP is like collaboration and the readiness and response, like it takes time and money, like it takes money to do this work, right? Like, and oftentimes we just like do it as like, well, it's really important, so like we should like carve away some time, but like that also means if I'm doing this, I'm not doing something else, and like I think having to make that compromise kind of sucks. So like it would be great if we could just like fully invest in what collaborative infrastructure looks like across the sector, so that it is resourced and we can do it well and not just piecemeal. Like, never mind, I'll stop talking. But I think those are.
I mean, yeah, that's like, I was going to say that. Basically, I mean, I think it's so much of it is about funder behavior, and I think a foundation, one of our funders is the Sewell Foundation, and I really appreciate the way that they have shifted their requirements, their application requirements. Now they're one-year reporting. Instead of writing a grant report, you have a 45-minute phone call or a Zoom call. And then there's also just like work that I'm seeing happening around, community advised granting and the kind of trying to reduce that like large gap between funder and organization. And I think like that's a piece of this collaboration thing I've been thinking about as we've been having this conversation is that someone the other day was talking about a funder doing us a favor by giving us money, and that's not how I see it, and I think that's not how many of us see it, right? That we are actually, I got kind of heated, and I was like, no, we're doing them a favor because we make them look good by taking their money, and they get to put our name on their whatever. And it's more complicated than that, but I think that is an old school kind of nonprofit philanthropy model that I think I'm seeing a lot of really amazing work pushing away from that, but I think that needs to keep happening, is like, that power needs to continue to shift.
Jen, if I can add, so I was slow in responding to this because I have 3 different lanes that I'm fundraising for that can be seen as collective. One, Southeast Asian Collaborative is very much Khmer, Maine, leaning it into its relatively prosperity or growth. We're one of the more visible Asian American organizations, and so when we apply for a grant to the state as well as a grant from Maine Voices, we re-granted some of those funds to the Filipino community and to other Asian American groups. There's a People's Coalition for Social and Justice Safety. I'm messing that up right now, but Safety and Justice, and it's a number of immigrant orgs that are fundraising to support folks experiencing detention. But the thing that I just kind of thought of up here is going back to my thing about marriages. A husband and wife can form a joint bank account, but I don't think I've ever heard of, and I know I'm speaking to the banks in here, of nonprofits being able to do a joint account. And so maybe that's something MANP can look into with banks, but if we're looking for a new financial product, there are multiple nonprofits that are trying to pool resources, but it's hard because we have our separate bank accounts, our separate boards, and our separate financial procedures. But if there's a way for collaboratives to actually share a financial product and to be able to co-make decisions on that, it would actually activate more collaboration.
That's an interesting idea. I love that. Is there anyone else in the audience who has a question they'd like to ask? please introduce yourself before you ask your question?
Hello, my name is Shira Patterson, and I'm the president and CEO at Heart of Maine United Way in Bangor. And we recently just opened the Community Maine's Nonprofit Hub. So this is a physical space that's shared office, meeting space, but also want it to be a real genuine space for community collaboration, where people can come share ideas, gather partnerships, all of that. And so I would just love any advice you folks might have to how we can start right off the bat to shape and foster that environment.
How's your coffee?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, in my experience, like, go through people's stomach. I mean, having good food and good coffee cannot be overstated.
At the ECC, we have monthly member meetings, and we all come together and we talk about boring building stuff that's happening or air grievances. But we also have started to talk about what we can offer each other, because we're all kind of new in this space, or people have varying levels of relationship. And I think that's been a lovely practice to be oh, actually, maybe MPC can offer a grant research training to all of the tenants. We also brought the foundation directory online to all of the tenants and anyone really that steps into the doors. And so it's just a service that anyone can access. And I think, just thinking about ways that you can share those types of offerings amongst each other first, and then maybe figuring out what involving the broader community could look like too.
I think a lot of people also don't have physical meeting space, and
Yeah.
and figuring out who needs that space. A lot of grassroots organized, not even nonprofits, groups that are just collectives or collaboratives are always looking for meeting space. So getting connected to those folks in your community.
Building on Annette's idea, I think there's a real hunger for community right now.
Yeah.
So the predecessor of this campaign I mentioned around ocean funding is something called the MOLT, the Maine Ocean Leaders Team. And like your situation with Jen, a lot of us were new in our role, so we created this 25-member loose coalition, and we meet every quarter. We kind of go around and talk about what we're facing and how do we do shared challenges. So think about something like that, where you have a day a month where you facilitate a gathering of your tenants to sit together and kind of commiserate, share challenges, share recent wins.
Thank you.
And one thing that ECC does very well, you'd think an organization running a capital camp, well, they just finished, I think, and fundraising for its own operations would also be stereotypically competitive. But one thing they do is they actually do support some of the tenants' events. When we held Khmer New Year and Seafest, I mean, it's not much, but it's $100, $200, but it's still something. And so if your space, the organization has resources, you can say we support our tenants as well.
I think I saw a question back. Yeah, great. This will be our last audience question, then we'll start to wrap up.
Hi, I'm Elaine Grant. I'm a consultant in Belfast, and I'm wondering whether it seems like one of the biggest challenges to collaborations like this is communicating with the public, and because everybody has often that's where the agendas come out of the different organizations, and I'm wondering what kind of challenges you've run into and how you've solved those kinds of challenges, if you have any examples.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I'm not sure I understand the question, sorry. With challenges with communicating?
Well, if you're collaborating with another organization or with a coalition of organizations, and then you want to communicate some big initiative or some, you want to get Congress on your side, and you're trying to do a communications campaign to do that. Sometimes it can be a little fraught, and I'm just wondering if that's been the case or if this is not a problem.
Yeah, and Hallie, I know you guys collaborate with other organizations all the time.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we think about is who our audience is. I mean, that's obvious, but we sometimes the organizations that we work with don't know the right language to use to talk about queer and trans programming, right? And so I really appreciate, today I got an email from Inclusive Ski Touring, which is an org that we collaborate with. We're collaborating on a couple ski touring programs for queer folks and trans folks, and they sometimes don't get the language right, and something I really appreciate is they'll send it over and they don't have an ego when I'm like, change this, this is how this should look. And I think not having an ego is really important in thinking about how to get information out. And then the other piece is knowing, like we do a lot of collaboration with the Nature-Based Education Consortium, which I think is one of y'all's funders, right? Do they fund you guys, the Outdoor Equity Fund? And we work with them to plan and run BIPOC programming, and they communicate with their network. And also we do collaborations with Tender Table, which is also a BIPOC-led organization. And they have the networks that we don't have, is what I'm trying to say. And so just like knowing who your networks are, what information or what language is going to work for them, and what type of communication is going to work for them. I'm not sure that's totally what you're asking, but I think that's been a takeaway for us.
And I think figuring out, doing the mapping, which I know consultants love to do, mapping things out, but sort of the assets that each organization has. One organization might have a bigger email list, one might have a bigger social media presence, and one might have, you know, a bigger TikTok presence. I don't know, but an example is while we're not trying to get Congress to do anything, we are trying to grow interest and awareness of green crabs. And it's hard because they're green crabs. They don't look like Jonah crabs or a lot of the other crabs, but the Southeast Asian community loves them. We started getting involved in that project, and we're working with Quahog Bay Conservancy and greencrabs.org. And so we put out a reel on Instagram, and Quahog Bay Conservancy, they just got a new ED, had reached out to me saying, hey, we'd love to do joint comms, this is super exciting. And I, in typical fashion, just said yes without thinking about it. And what ended up happening was the three of us got together, Quahog Bay Conservancy, Khmer, Maine, greencrab.org. And greencrab.org has an ED who is an exceptional marketer and blog writer, and she came up to Maine, she visited Quahog, she visited us, she visited Fork Food Lab, and also Fork Food Lab is the other partner. She brought up a blog piece that we could all share, and Khmer Maine shared it, Quahog shared it, we all inputted into that, and we had one person that was driving it, and Fork Food Lab shared it because it's in their facility. So it can work, and I think it's by understanding and mapping out the assets each of us has that can be utilized in different ways.
Great. Go ahead. I was just going to say what Glenn was going to say, I'm pretty sure. Which was like piggybacking off what you said, right? Which is like being very clear about what each individual organization is bringing to the table. So like the clarity of your role and like what you do independently, and then like what is additive when you come together, right? Like MANP and MPC just had a joint staff retreat, and the outcome was like, we should create an infographic. And like, it's true, like we should create something that like identifies like how we are uniquely positioned individually, and like what we do together, and like what that looks like, so that I can avoid people being like, what's the difference between MANP and MPC? Because it'll be a clear, really cool infographic eventually.
Thank you, Jeannette.
Was that what you were going to say?
Yes.
Was
All about
also the infographic too? Yeah, I bet.
I will just add, so this is like we deal with this, we dealt with it not long ago. My colleague Elijah Miller, our Chief Communication Officer, is here, and we had to work through this in a collaborative project where we were doing joint communications. And what I continually realize, since I'm new to Maine, I mean, it's true anywhere, but somebody told me when I got here that Maine is a small town masquerading as a big state. So, of course, there are reputations, and I'm new. A lot of my counterpart CEOs are new, but that doesn't really matter. The reputations still hold, and you know, we're dealing with perceptions that were formed years ago, and that influences how people work together or don't. So it's tricky. What I think you need to do is really over-prepare and over-plan in a coordinated way. You're fortunate. I only gave you 5 lessons. I had like 7
Oh, you
or 8.
had more.
And one of them that landed on the cutting room floor was joint communications and joint development planning, because those are the 2 sore nerve areas, communications and fundraising. And you have to front load the coordinated communications plans and the coordinated fundraising plans. And then, like, I've spent a lot of time in my 2 years here getting to know the leaders of the other organizations, and you got to invest that time like you two did to build that chemistry, because things will go awry and people will act on old perceptions, and you have to be able to pick up the phone and call your counterpart and say, hey, something's going on here, we got to get together and solve it. So it will happen, and you just got to be prepared. It's like embracing the mess, as you said.
Well, I am going to start to wind us down here. But first I want to thank all of you. This has been really, really helpful, and I appreciate all the work all of you are doing. So thanks for being here today. You can join me. That'd be really great. So folks, I don't have a fancy closeout for you. I just want to once again express my gratitude to Bob and Corinne, our fabulous facilitators, our guest panelists today, all of our members, our sponsors, all of the people who came, our wayfinders who helped us participate. Every single one of you has been really critical to making this a really powerful event, and I look forward to sharing out with you all of the results of the discussions that you had. Please let us know in the evaluation what you thought of today, and make any suggestions for if you're interested in seeing more of this type of interaction, what it might look like, because I think there was a lot here. And just again to highlight the themes that are picking up for me is that we need to create spaces where we feel like we have the trust and relationships that are growing, so that we can have some difficult conversations sometimes. So, because it's gonna get messy, but we also know that, okay, now I'm gonna get into analogy land, okay, right? Like for a fertile ground, right, the mud is messy, right? Like it's wet and messy, and we have to get our hands in and start playing around with it, because otherwise those seeds aren't gonna grow. So, okay, you can criticize my analogy later. I try. Anyway, it's been great to be in community with all of you today. I hope, yes, please. This is my board chair, Justin Strasburger. Therefore, where are you guys? Look. They're already out at the bar. Oh. Look at that. See that guy, John, back there? He is the one who did. Thank you very much, Justin. I did forget to thank the staff. But thank you. Justin is from Full Place, Full Potential. He's the chair of the Maine Association of Nonprofits Board of Directors. I'm really, really tired. We are going to close out today, but we do have a reception, so I hope some of you hang around, and thank you so much. We look forward to continuing the conversation.